that was one of the worst case scenario things to happen, and it happened. What do I do now? I thought there was something wrong with me. I felt a lot of shame and guilt, honestly. Your thoughts create your reality, right? And seeing my income start to rise rapidly, I honestly started bringing in my goals quicker because I was like, why am I waiting a year to do this when I could do it in 3 months?
Anyways, all of these amazing things as a result of doing exactly what you have said. And I say that again to support that this is such valuable work and it really makes the difference. Hello, my friend, and welcome to The Untold Journey. This is a personal development podcast exploring the untold side of achievement and success. We are diving into the psychology of how people successfully navigate challenges, grow through adversity, and the personal transformations that they experience along the way. I'm your host, Jordan Kilpatrick. I'm a psychotherapist fascinated by the human experience, and today you will get to hear my conversation with Punith Upadhya as we explore his journey from feeling ashamed of not being good enough to a successful engineer who felt destined for more, and finally how he transitioned to be an entrepreneur and mindset coach doing over $100,000 a month. You're going to get to learn how he turned self-doubt into unstoppable growth, how he silenced his inner critic, yes, that one that we all have, and the incredible impact that had on his success, and lastly, the exact small daily habits that created his aligned $100K a month life. Enjoy. Punith, you followed the textbook path to success. A top engineering school, a high-paying job with good benefits, giving you stability and security that so many people would be jealous of. And despite that, something wasn't clicking and you felt destined for more. And so you saw other people, they can travel the world, have a massive impact, and work on what they're passionate about. But that was still out of reach for you. And then something clicked. Something inside you had changed, and while maintaining a full-time engineering job, you built multiple businesses, quintupled your income, and are now living that life of freedom and purpose that was once just a dream. And I am so curious to hear more about this. Can you tell me a little bit about when you were engineer Punith? Where were you in life? What was going on for you at that time?
Basically, so I majored in material science and engineering, and I would say at that time, I wasn't aware of what I didn't know. And so anything that I struggled with in terms of my self-worth, and even whenever I did feel stuck, I would say I didn't know why. And I just kept on, I think when I think back to those moments, I felt a lot of shame and guilt, honestly, whenever I wasn't super productive or whenever I wasn't truly feeling like I was reaching my potential and continuously growing. And honestly, I felt inconsistent, and I thought it was a reflection of my discipline, And
Sure.
So with that, I was just like, man, I know I'm destined for more. I know that I just want to keep growing. I know that this isn't it. And whenever I felt like I was just in stagnation, not really seeing the growth, whether it was in my job or even outside of it, right? I've always had side hustles. I've always had businesses since college. I've always been leading organizations. I always felt kind of stagnant or inconsistent. And I never really knew why. I was just I just need to force it, right? I need to push myself even harder and just get out of it. I just need to grow. But I just always just kept finding myself going right back. So I think that was the first thing, honestly, when you asked that question, that came to my mind of I didn't really know why, but I just felt like I wasn't really moving the needle as fast as I'd like to, but I still had this aspiration for more. I knew that I didn't want to stay in a job for 40 years and retire at 65. I just at that point in time, it was great. I love the flexibility that came with it. I love the opportunities that came with it. It's just something that I knew deep down I wouldn't be doing for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think so many people can relate with that. You go to school and you get this degree. And I think especially for many high achievers, they do well in school. Even just think for myself, school came very easily for me. I went to a good school. I did the things. I was always a high achiever. But similar to you, and one of the things that really stood out to me that you said was that, so despite you in a good school, in a good program, doing well, ambitious, you're leading organizations, you're doing these side hustles, like from the outside, I imagine people would look at that and be like, man, Punith is just like killing it. And despite that, there's still that little bit of inner friction that I'm destined for more. There is a little bit of shame and guilt if I'm not growing, if I'm not on fire, if I'm not just like crushing it out, and I should just be more disciplined and I should just push harder. Can we dive into that inner friction a little bit more? Yeah, like, can you tell me what that was like for you at that time?
Yeah, I think when you said that, I was like, yes, 100% I resonate with it, because anybody looking from the outside is like, this person is very successful. Everybody else was saying like, oh my gosh, you are gonna like absolutely crush it in everything that you do. And, you know, part of me believed it, but then the other part of me was like, well, I'm the only one that spends 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with myself, right? And so I was the one who felt like, you know, that, I say paradigm, but just kind of like those natural habits of, you know, whenever I felt overwhelmed or just didn't know what to do, like my escape personally was just checking my phone instead of wanting to think, right, and figure out what to do. I would check my phone, and my phone was like, there was an unhealthy attachment there, but it was just something that like those habits, those neural pathways just developed over years and years of just like that automatic behavior. And so with that, I felt like when I was reflecting, I was like, well, I'm wasting a lot of time, you know, just on my phone, using online media, etc., instead of like working on my businesses or something. I thought there was something wrong with me. And that was kind of what the inner friction was, of like, there's this version of myself, of like the version of Punith that is realizing his full potential. And then there's a current version of me. And that gap honestly created a lot of friction, because I was holding myself to an unreasonably high standard, and I wasn't giving myself grace or really treating myself with the love and respect that I would treat someone else. Honestly, like that was a big learning for me, is like, I wasn't treating myself as a best friend or like, you know, a business partner or anybody else that I would talk to. Anytime if anybody else was just like, hey, this is what I'm dealing with, I would give them so much like love and understanding, but I wasn't doing that with myself. And so I was just holding myself to an unreasonably high standard. And then that was honestly like a compounding effect in the negative direction, because it was just ultimately like it was detrimental for my self-worth and my self-image as well, of, you know, me saying or feeling like I should be doing X, Y, and Z, but not really doing it, you know? And so that was kind of that inner friction. Yeah. And it was, I didn't realize it until like, I thought that was normal, but ultimately now I know just how detrimental that was for my growth.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And again, I think something so relatable. When we have those high standards that we're aiming for, and then we feel like we're falling short, like that hurts, right? Because as you mentioned about the identity, like, oh, well, now I suck. Or that's the type of thing that maybe we say to ourselves. And then we turn to something to escape. And so you mentioned your phone. And now there's so many ways that we do that, right? For me, it was video games, but similar apples, or it's a similar comparison, right? I'm really interested when you said, we have this feeling like there's something wrong with me. Can you say more on that? Like, where do you think that comes from? You mentioned unreasonably high standards, but yeah, I'd love to just dive into more of that with you, and like where that came from for you at that time.
Yeah, it's really good questions, and these are really making me think too. So I appreciate it, but forgive me too as I think through things, and let's have that conversation too, because I want your input. Where I feel like, you know, when I felt this idea of like, or this belief that something is wrong with me, you know, I think I've always been my biggest self-critic, right? And, you know, part of that came with just like my upbringing. There was always that standard. I don't know whether it was self-imposed or, you know, just from like the family upbringing, but like you said, high achiever, straight A's, etc. Like that is always the standard, right?
Yeah.
Nothing less is really acceptable. And to an extent, I had that discipline when it came to school, and it was easy to measure that, right? Like you can measure your GPA, you can measure how many times you're on the honor roll, right? But then when you enter the real world, then all of a sudden there's a different way to measure success, honestly. And it's a lot of different ways. First one that's probably easiest to measure is now income, right? And like how much money you're making. And that's that's one thing in and of itself. But even with that, right, like, you know, me having straight A's or like how well I do in school, my GPA is not going to be a direct reflection of the income I make. There's actually so many more factors in the real world that comes into play. And now all of a sudden I'm like, well, there's these other people, right, who like didn't go to college, or maybe they dropped out and they're making so much more money. And I'm like, okay, now I'm just trying to figure out like, what are those like measures of like success in the real world? And now it's just kind of mind boggling of figuring that out too, right? Of, you know, people in different industries, different companies who can perhaps make more money than I can in my role, despite me maybe having a higher GPA. And again, that's not to brag. That's just me observing things, right? But then there's other things too. Like I am not very like money centric in that realm. I just use it as a tool to build a more holistic life. Yeah. And so that is when I realized that there's more to it in life in terms of happiness, peace of mind, right? The relationships you've built, the love in your life too. And so ultimately, I think that it just when those waters were muddied a little bit, it became hard for me to really figure out like, okay, how do I deem myself successful? And then because of that, there was a gap there. And then I think that's where I became my own biggest critic too, or like that just started to expand and expand.
Yeah. Well said. That makes so much sense. And so the reason I'm asking is so many people struggle with this, but so few people talk about the struggle with it, you know, and they can actually talk from the other side of the struggle with it as well and say, yeah, it's very common and it's normal for us to have these. And here's what we can start to do about it, which is one of the things I'm so excited to dive in with you. I'm not quite done with my curiosity around this part of the journey quite yet, but I am very excited for us to get to that stage because I think so many people are interested to hear that. For example, I was telling a client of mine that you were coming on the podcast and I was just describing the character of Punith a little bit. He was like, man, tell me when that's available because that sounds like exactly something I want to listen to. And so, yeah, excited to keep going. There's a couple of really interesting things that you said. One of the things I wrote down was that so often we use income as a measure of success. Prior to that, we use GPA, and then we get into the real world and we use income. And yet we find so often that income is not a very good measure of success, you know, and we're still like, well, what the hell? I was maybe sold this dream, but you hit on some other things. You said peace, love, and relationships as well as maybe better metrics of success. And I love that because I've spent so much time thinking about that myself. Like, how the hell do you define success? And what is it that I actually want anyhow, right? And yeah. And when you were in that stage of your life and really hard on yourself, where you're not giving yourself the love and respect, the grace that you might give to others, you mentioned, you know, like and I think that's also very common. We tend to beat on ourselves very hard. Where do you think that ties into like you trying to push harder to be more disciplined? Like if I just like crack the whip a little bit harder, maybe I'll push through.
Yes. I didn't even think about it like that, but 100% I would say that, you know, I felt if I'm my own biggest critic, then I changed my perspective towards that and whether it was healthy or not healthy, you know, I was like, okay, at least then I can reflect on that and then correct it. Or keep correcting it, right? Sure. But I think I wasn't approaching it in the right way where, you know, it is right. Like we talk about love. That's now something that's in my morning routine is I write down the things that I'm grateful for. Mm-hmm. I'm grateful for the things coming into my life, right? Those are my goals, but I'm grateful as if I already have it. But then I also write down the things that I love about myself too. And that's part of my routine because that was so important to me of like I truly just want to develop more self-love because that goes such a long way. My relationship with myself is honestly how I view myself. And so how do I get to that point of viewing myself and loving myself in a way of the same way that I interact with others too, which is with grace, which is with empathy and understanding too, and recognizing that nobody is perfect, but this is the avenue in which I can continue to realize my potential in a more efficient and healthy way as well. So I don't know if I really answered your question, but I do think that, you know, that I truly felt like if I could just crack the whip on myself before, then that was my avenue to build more discipline. But there was more to it than that, because I had a paradigm, right? And that's where like 95 to 98% of my habits, my behaviors, that's all subconscious, right? And so it actually takes more time to rewire my programming. It takes more of like intention, I would say. And it does take more time to kind of rebuild those habits and overcome those limiting beliefs, or really that current paradigm, in order to change my habits. So I was doing it perhaps in a inefficient way, I would say.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And that self-love piece is so critical, as well as the grateful as if we already have the thing. These are evidently valuable lessons that have come along the way, and now things that you teach people in your mindset coaching. So quick shout out to Punith's mindset coaching, links in the description. Be sure, if you're looking for to really level up your mindset, make sure you check that out. And we're going to talk more about the mindset coaching in a little bit as we get to that stage in the story. But one of the last things I want to ask, just because I think I see it so commonly with clients and it just in people all over, and then we'll get back to the story and how we got into the businesses and all of that. You mentioned loving yourself, loving oneself as a very important role. But we have this interesting balance, or juxtaposition maybe is the correct word, between the I am not good enough and therefore I need to crack the whip harder and push harder, and the state of I should love myself so that I can be better. I'm curious, like a lot of people really struggle to bridge between those two places. And I'm wondering if you just think to your own journey, how did you make that transition from that place of not love to the place of love?
That is a good question. And honestly, there was a couple learnings, like awarenesses that I gained where honestly it was more so of like, the way I'm doing things right now just doesn't make sense towards my goals, right? And then it just naturally shifted towards the self-love, but I'll start here, right? So when we talk about that, like criticism towards myself in a negative way, what were the feelings behind that? Really, it was shame and guilt, right? And so when we think about there's an emotional frequency chart, right? Highest point is enlightenment. You know, you go down the
map
line.
Of consciousness?
Yes, the map of consciousness.
Hell yeah,
right?
man. Yeah.
And so there's a series of frequencies, right? And the gratitude, I believe, is one of them. There's neutrality. And then you go down the list, right? And near the bottom or at the bottom is shame and guilt, right?
Yeah.
And so when I learned about this, at first I was like, okay, yeah, I know shame and guilt are bad, right? Or what? I guess they weren't serving me. Let's not say bad versus
I get you.
good.
Good catch.
But with that, the learning there, and this is just kind of my learnings through my investment in mentorship and learning more about the mind, what I realized is that, so your frequency, right? Like you have a certain vibration at any point in time. And when you're at a certain frequency right now, and you start to attract opportunities, whether it's income, whether it's people, etc., that can match that vibration, right? And so vibration, frequency, that's the same thing. Like how I liken it to more like colloquial terms is attitude, right? Like what is the level, what is your energy that you bring to conversations, your enthusiasm, etc. But anyways, what I realized is that when I'm at such a low frequency, then I start attracting opportunities, people, like circumstances that are at that low vibration as well. But I also close off myself to, greater opportunities that align with my goal achieved self, right? And so there's actually an experiment about this, part of a book called E Squared by Pam Grouts. But there's actually, if you have like two clothes hangers and you bend them kind of in like an L shaped, and you have straws where you hold them, like, so for anybody who's watching, right? I'll try to explain it though. You're holding them kind of in front of you like a steering wheel, but it's actually clothes hangers that are built in kind of an L shaped, right? So you can hold them and they'll be just, when you're in a neutral mindset, they're just faced straight, they're not moving, nothing's happening, right? But when you start thinking about things that give you gratitude, when you think about things that you love, that make you happy, then those clothes hangers, they legitimately expand. Like I did this experiment myself. I bought the clothes hangers. I got the straws. Like I did the whole thing. And I was legitimately thinking like, right behind me, I have my vision board, and I was looking at the pictures of me taking my brother to a Steelers game, and just that memory gave me so much joy and gratitude.
Yeah.
Those clothes hangers literally expanded. There was the energy field of that. And so there was that element. But then whenever I thought about things that stress me out, or were like emotions around worry, anxiety, etc., those clothes hangers literally closed off. Like they would literally
they came together?
They came together, yes. And so how I viewed that is, one, like our thoughts, you know, are energy, right? Like those thoughts are then reflected into our energy field, but more so they close you off too. They close you off from making decisions, from thinking, from being creative, and from attracting opportunities that you desire and that, you know, you want to bring into your life. And so that was kind of one of my biggest learnings, is when I learned that on a deeper level and I actually tried it, I saw it with my own two eyes, then I was like, being a critic and feeling shame, feeling guilt is literally not serving me for any purpose. It's actively like detracting away from me getting opportunities that I want to attract into my life. And so naturally then I was like, okay, what is the opposite of that? And it's grace and it's self-love. And so then that's when I really started to, and again, it's not an overnight shift, right? But whenever I caught those thoughts and those feelings of shame and guilt, I would just acknowledge it. I would be mindful of it. And then I would just replace it, right? And I would just replace it with a thought that actually served me and was constructive rather than detrimental.
Amazing. There's so much goodness in there. You're just like dropping bombs of gold. Like these are things that I think old Jordan, just speaking for myself, like Jordan who grew up in black and white thinking, who was very analytical, very scientific, I would have listened to this stuff and been like, nah, you know, just no way. But I think the scientific lens actually at one point became very beneficial for me to understand these sorts of things. The hanger experiment is very interesting, and I'm very curious to read about that. You said E Squared was the book title?
Yeah, E Squared by Pam Grout. Lots of great, there's like 9 experiments in there, and very easy experiments to do. And they just really showed me, like, again, I have an analytical mind just like you, and you know, that really showed me kind of the higher powers at play here, right? And like the power of the mind, and you know, the universe also supporting you, right? Like when you start paying attention to things and you're on the lookout, and those things actually start coming into your life too. You know, like unexpected gifts. That's one of the experiments. And I just spent 48 hours just paying attention to these things, just following the experiments. And it was just mind-blowing, the results that came as well.
And I don't know about you, but for me, that was something I had to experience firsthand before I really had buy-in to it. There's an openness and a willingness to experience as the first prerequisite. And then when we start paying attention, when we start watching for it, all of a sudden it's everywhere and you can't unsee it. And it's like, wow, what? How did I miss this?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. There was one of them where one of the experiments is like paying attention to purple feathers, right? Or like just being on the lookout for purple feathers. And there was other things as well. It was just a series of things. It was beige cars. It was, you know, yellow butterflies, and it was purple feathers, right? I live in Chicago, guys. So beige cars, like that came fairly quickly. There's a lot of cars here. And then I was in a bookstore actually, and I saw a book cover that had a yellow butterfly that same day, right? But then what took a while was the purple feathers, right? And so, you know, at that point, it was really a learning lesson of, there was part of me that was like, so like not desperate, but I just really wanted to find purple feathers, that on my walks, I would start walking into random stores, just seeing like, oh, maybe there's like some book cover or something with purple feathers.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, like, I don't regret making those decisions, but part of me felt like I was forcing it a little bit. And so nothing really came, but I still was like actively paying attention without forcing it. And that's when I went to my favorite spot in the city. It's on the Riverwalk here in Chicago, right in the Loop. And I went to my favorite spot where it's essentially these staircases right next to the river. And I just sat down, right? And my 48 hours, right, which was the deadline, was literally coming up, right? And I kind of like had given up to a certain extent on finding those purple feathers. I was like, two out of 3 is pretty solid, right?
Yeah.
And then I literally, like, as I sat down, a pigeon literally walked by. Pigeons normally gray, right?
Yeah.
This pigeon, and I took a picture, it literally had purple feathers around its neck. And
Right.
I took that picture, and it was like right at that 48-hour mark too. And I was like, okay, so this is really a thing that I need to pay more attention to. So
Yeah.
that was just a really cool story. It was just a personal experience of like, wow, this really works, right? Or like, there's more at play here that I wasn't initially aware of.
Yeah, I love that. There's so many things that I just want to dive into, and then that's why we're gonna get back to the story here. But you're just giving so many good things. One of the things that really stood out to me as you were talking about that example with the purple feather, and so I've recently been reading Letting Go by David Hawkins, who, for listeners who aren't aware, David Hawkins is the author of The Map of Consciousness, which we previously just referenced. And so one of the things he talks about in an entire chapter in Letting Go is on desire, because desire is one of the frequencies in the map of consciousness. And what he talks about is that the intense desire, TLDR, is that the intense desire actually inhibits us getting the thing that we desire. And so if we are clinging too tightly to our demanding of this thing, we actually prevent ourselves from getting it. And it's when we let go of the intensity of the desire that it comes to. And so I just heard that play out in your story. I want to find this purple feather. I want to find it. When we finally surrender that and we just go and let go, all of a sudden the pigeon walks by, right? It's like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I know it's that same idea, I feel like, has just popped up in multiple times across my life. You kind of have to relax into that idea instead of holding so tightly too. So that's absolutely right. And I love that analogy there. I love that explanation too.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So let's get back to your story here. Let's go. We're in a time. You are an engineer. You know that there's more available for you. You've always been very ambitious. You're doing all sorts of things, side hustles, etc. Where did the journey go from here? Because I know you've made multiple businesses, right? Maybe you can take me back to maybe like the first one, and let's go sequentially here.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Let's see. First, so my last year of college was when, well, it was a COVID project is when it started, right? Like most side projects do nowadays. It was a podcast, actually. Okay. So it was a material science podcast called It's a Material World. And that started purely as a hobby, right? You know, what else is there to do when you're at home?
Totally.
And so with that, you know, we created a podcast where we started inviting founders, professors, etc., even other peers in the material science space. And that was my first side hustle, I would say. It was my first business. It came like my last year of college, and then it went on for another three years, I would say. And it turned into a business fairly quickly, right? When I started really like learning about the value of my time versus just purely income, right? And there were certain things that came with running a podcast that I didn't particularly enjoy, that my co-host didn't particularly enjoy, and that's editing, right?
Yes.
And so with that, like, I didn't, honestly, at that point, I didn't want to hear my own voice multiple times. And so at that point, we were like, okay, we need an editor, but neither of us had any money, right? We're college students. And so we were like, okay, we need to find a way to make some money so that we can pay an editor. And that is when we started, you know, we had built out this network with our podcasts, and we had found people that really resonated with our mission and our vision. And we honestly just partnered with them, with these companies who had a similar vision. We were able to support one another. They sponsored our podcast, and they funded our journey, and as a result, we brought value to them in unique ways with our network, with our reach, and with our relationships as well. And so that's the first time where that was truly a business, right? And it was really fun, honestly. Like, what I realized with each and every one of my businesses is that I got so many growth opportunities that came with it. I got to master my craft in sales, as a speaker, as a leader, right? As a team builder. All of these, what I'm learning right now, are very valuable skills, but also just, you know, opportunities for growth and skills that I love developing. I love mastering my craft and expanding in a number of ways. And so that was my first business. And then, you know, ultimately, I think I can't really put a finger on it right here, but you know, there was a point where the passion for it didn't necessarily outweigh the work required to keep it going, right? To continue to sustain it. We got it to a great point where we had a team underneath us where honestly, my co-host and I, we just really had to show up to those recordings and everything else was done.
That's
and I
amazing.
love that. I love building out those systems and the teams where I can focus on my highest and best use, right? I think we just ran into some challenges around like, for that to really continue to increase in income rather than just purely like being able to fund our team and then give us just some like side income, right? Whereas what I wanted, like what I found really resonated with me was this desire for more freedom, like time freedom and financial freedom and location freedom. And that is, you know, just something that was always very attractive to me, of being able to control my schedule entirely and have the financial freedom to be able to travel, be able to take my loved ones on trips, be able to give back even more. Like I just had this desire to make more so that I could give more to my loved ones and just be able to take care of more people too. And I just ultimately felt like I got what I needed out of the podcast, but it wasn't that vehicle to achieve that big of a goal, right? And so naturally I set that to the side and we paused on that, and kind of out of that came my short-term rental business. And so short-term rentals kind of fell into that world. And I know it seems a little bit random. So
how did you go from podcast to material science to rentals?
I'll share basically. So it was an interesting journey. The podcast started like purely as a hobby, right? So I wasn't thinking about money at that point, but I was always very interested in team building. And so business was just naturally something that just came naturally from the podcast. But along that journey, I started listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast. I started reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? Like I got into the personal finance element because now all of a sudden I'm graduating and I have my first job. So that really opened my eyes of, you know, what it really means to build wealth and to grow my income as well. We talk about real estate. We talk about passive income versus, you know, businesses, right? Like all of that was new to me. And I think I just ate it up, honestly. And I was like, I want this. And I know, like, if I was just doing an engineering job, like what was my evenings for? Like, what did I want to spend that time on? For me, it was building a business, you know? And because of that, I had this like inclination of, I want to get into the real estate space. It seems like most people who are very wealthy, right? They are in real estate, right? They own real estate, or they're in that realm in some fashion. So I had this desire to house hack, basically. Like after a year or two of saving money, I just set that goal of like, I'm going to buy a duplex. I'm going to live in one side, rent out the other. Right. And so I guess fast forward, right? I went through that journey, built out the right team in place in terms of realtors, vendors, etc. I learned that process and I bought my first duplex in St. Paul, Minnesota in 2022. And so with that, the other unit was already furnished. And so they were previously renting it out on Airbnb. And the owner was telling me how much money he was making as a short-term rental versus what it could have made as a long-term rental. And
where people would pay per month versus an Airbnb being short-term.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yep. Sorry. So Airbnb is short-term versus someone who is staying in a long-term, like for 12 months versus someone who's staying for like 3 to 7 days. Right. And so with that, I was just like, well, if you're going to let me keep all the furniture, which he did, like, let me just learn this as quickly as possible. And I got really good at it really quickly. And I loved the revenue potential that came with it. And so naturally, like, that's when I invested in a short-term rental mastermind, right? Yeah. So I invested in my education because I was like, I want to be an expert in this before I go and help others do the same thing that I'm doing here. Like I took responsibility because these are other people's homes that I wanted to manage. And so I took responsibility of really investing in my education to deliver a top-notch service better than anyone else out in that industry. So
how did you go from have my own duplex, I'm renting out the other side as an Airbnb, to I now want to manage others? Like what was in there?
Right there was effectively this desire to accelerate my growth, right? And so I put in I put in a good chunk of money into that down payment, right? And then now I was like, okay, I had two options, right? One option was, okay, let this make money, and then I'll save that. And then 3 years down the line, I'll invest in another home, right? And then I'll continue to do that. And that'll like over 10, 20 years will like scale my portfolio, and that'll have compounding effects. Nothing wrong with that, 100%. But what I wanted rather was like, how do I get access to more capital so that I can accelerate that growth of like investing in more properties, or, just building a business that gives me more of that freedom as well too, right? Like, and now I had the background of like, hey, I can do this for other people. Why don't I actually figure out how to do this for other people? Like this was now my unique expertise, and I had that faith in myself that I can build a business. So I hope that answers your question. That's kind of what just sparked that decision.
Yeah, it does. There's really interesting in that you're painting the picture of your mindset development over time when you read between the lines of what you're saying. So what I mean by this, you started with a podcast in COVID, and it's like, oh, well, you know what? I'm in material sciences. Let's start a material science podcast because it's fun to build stuff. Let's just give this a go. In there, you started to hire a team and build systems. And there's like this desire for growth that seems to be such a core theme of everything that you're saying. And maybe attached to, and please correct me at any point if
You're nailing
I'm missing the mark, but attached to the growth seems to be this perspective that you took, because as you explained it, it's like, oh yeah, we built a podcast, we built a team, and everything just started to run on its own, and it was great. I just had to show up. It's not that simple, and it's not that easy, and there's lots of failures and challenges and hurdles along the way. And so many people are ambitious, but stuck in shame and guilt, and then also fear. What if this happens? What if this goes wrong? And I'm curious, did you encounter those, and how did you navigate those? And did growth and the desire for growth play a role? Or what was that? What was that like?
Yeah, definitely, right? Like definitely shame, guilt, fear, like all of that are just natural byproducts if you're not already on top of it, which, very few people are right out of the get-go, right?
Yeah.
So like that's just a natural part of the process with building a business. You're going to face failures, you're going to face rejections, right? People are going to say no, things are going to go wrong, right?
Yeah.
And that was just part of the process, I will say. And I, at that point in time, right, with that podcast, even the beginning of starting a short-term rental business, honestly, like my fear of failure, like for better or for worse, outweighed everything else, where I was like, I am not going to let myself fail.
Right.
So I'm just going to keep going and figure it out. Right. And so even as an engineer, right, like we talk about system, we talk about team building, like I truly think that part came a little more naturally to me because of my previous experiences, but also how, I was programmed to think and solve problems as an engineer, right? Like SOPs, like standard operating procedures, that type of thing, that was easy to me, or easier compared to sales, right? Where sales was less natural to me, but I had to master my craft in sales in order to really grow our businesses. So, answer your question though, like shame, guilt, and fear were part of that process, but I just knew like with any business, you just can't give up, right? Like you just have to continue to persist until unless you really feel like you're called for something else, or like you've gotten everything out of that journey, right? Like for me, I think that decision, it came at the right time of like, I just felt like I got what I needed out of that podcast journey. I loved every moment of it, but it wasn't something that really fit into my long-term picture when I got more clarity around that. So again, I don't really feel like I quit that. I just made that decision to move on to something else, right? Where that set me up for more, like it was more in alignment with my future self and my goals.
Totally. That makes sense. And everything has its natural duration, right?
For sure. Yeah.
If we cling on to things for too long, we suffer, as we know. And so I really appreciate, as you're talking about it, and you're talking about, shame, guilt, and fear, they're part of building a business. They're part of entrepreneurship. And really, they're part of life. But so often people are stuck in, I think, the labeling, and this ties back into what you had said previously about it's not bad, but so many people label them as bad and wrong and shouldn't be and all of that. At that time, were you struggling with that at all? Or do you feel like you had kind of overcome it and just accepted, and maybe acceptance and neutrality is a key piece in this? I'm just trying to flesh out for somebody who's not in that state to understand how where they're at is normal and acceptable and how you navigated those things.
Oh yeah, good question. At that point, I felt shame, guilt, fear, like overwhelmed, anxiety, stress, like all of those things. And that was back in, all the way from 2020 to 2023. I had the podcast, right? And the short-term rentals, there was overlap with that as well, too. Okay. So at that point, I was doing a little bit of both, but I wasn't in this mindset work. I hadn't surrounded myself with, mentors or coaches in the mindset space. So all of that were feelings that definitely kept on arising, but I couldn't acknowledge them and, reprogram at that point, right? I just kind of accepted it. And that's what led to, honestly, some more inconsistencies and really that criticism too, like me being my biggest self-critic, that was still part of it, right? And so I think that all contributed to, and I didn't realize it at that time, but subconsciously that contributed to how I showed up in, certain sales meetings, right? Or yes. Like my routines in terms of reaching out to potential partners and sponsors and things like that. Like there's a reason that, again, that was my first business, but there was a reason why that went the way that it did too. And I didn't know it at the time, but part of it was my self-image of what I felt I deserved to earn, right? And also kind of the way I approached difficult situations too, right? I had this, it was easier for me to escape and it was harder for me to get back on track, right? Because I couldn't acknowledge those feelings too. So it all was part of the process. As I look back at it, I'm like, yes, it all makes sense, but I don't regret any of those moments. It was all just part of the learning journey.
Yeah. And what an amazing perspective shift to take, where they, like the quote, "The obstacle is the way," comes to mind from Marcus Aurelius. We often view them as these roadblocks when really they're stepping stones. When emotional pain isn't something we have to escape from, but is actually a teacher and can help us grow and can help us move forward. And I found just for myself, I struggled with that for so long. And so, I love diving into it with people like you who have gotten to the other side, because I think once we realize that it's possible, then we start to be like, oh, well, what the hell? Why don't I give that a try as well? And another thing I wanted to touch on is you mentioned the podcast lasted for about 3 years, roughly speaking. I think so often, because I think a lot of people listening to this that really that resonate with this are going to be people who are interested in entrepreneurship or personal growth, let's say, and realizing that, well, it wasn't that Punith did the podcast for 2 months and then all of this stuff happened and he didn't have any failures along the way and he never had fears and doubts and insecurities and all of those. But you had to show up day in and day out, over and over, despite the challenges. And 3 years when you're going through it can feel like a very long time, right? There's a lot of stuff in there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so it really is just a mark of it's not about taking massive action, right? It's honestly like the consistent action outweighs the massive, like inconsistent action, right? Like 100% of the time too. And so our biggest growth came when we honestly just made that commitment to ourselves that we would post one episode every single week, no matter what, right? And like there were certain times where like guests had to postpone or cancel last minute, and we could have made that decision at that point of like, okay, no episode this week, right? But instead, David and I were like, okay, we got to figure something else out, right? Like whether we bring in a team member or we bring in someone else, right, that we can bring in last minute, or do a solo podcast. We made it work every single time for that entirety of the year. And so that was like when we were producing, it felt like X the number of episodes that the next like biggest material science podcast was making, or really any other podcast in that sphere was making, because we were like, this is how we grow. We just continuously produce and then learn and reflect from that and continue to innovate too. So yeah, I just I really feel like that consistency goes a long way. And yeah, it wasn't something that I just did it for 2 months and then called it quits. No, it was something that took a lot of time. And it was just a huge growth opportunity and a lovely journey.
Yeah, amazing. So coming back to the housing now. Housing can be a very terrifying thing because now you have a lot of debt in order to buy a house, and people, especially if you over leverage. Now I'm starting to talk outside of my scope of expertise here, but my understanding is like the 2008 financial or housing crisis happened from a lot of people being over leveraged and stuff, and so I imagine there was a lot of fear, or at some point you must have encountered fear, like, what if this doesn't work out? What if, the house catches fire? What was that like for you to get into the housing scene?
Yeah, for sure. So I feel like I am very much like an eternal optimist. And for better or for worse, like sometimes I didn't really want to think a lot about what could go wrong because I was just, one, very inherently intrinsically positive. But two, I was like, if something goes wrong, then something goes wrong and I'll figure it out, right? And so sure, maybe those thoughts came to mind. I think honestly for me, it was more money centric of like, okay, if something goes wrong quickly, like how do I get the money to be able to pay things off, right? And that honestly, it happened, right? Like, like within the first 6 months, I think one of the furnaces went out, like it went just kaput.
Yeah.
And so that's like a big ticket expense, right? And so with that, there was just that element of like, okay, like even if that's like, that was one of the worst case scenario things to happen and it happened, what do I do now? Right? Like it's not like I can really let that like really tear me down and then give up on everything. Like what would be the purpose of that? That would honestly be a sunken cost anyways. So sure. I was like, we just got to keep pushing through. And so with that, I was like, okay, we'll get this on like they offered certain payment plans and I just looked at the numbers again. I'm like, we'll still be fine. Mm-hmm. And I have an engineering job that supports me anyways to help, right? Like I still had that stability too. And I was like, cool, whatever happens, I will find a way to make it work. And so those were some of those thoughts that came to mind. But honestly, like, and I think this is a blessing, is I just didn't really let those negative thoughts affect my decision making. Anytime they came up, I was like, there's no real point in letting, like, emotionalizing with that. I just honestly let it subside and I like set it aside. I acknowledged it, set it aside, and I just kept staying positive and had the faith that everything would work out because I'm making decisions and telling the universe that I'm ready for more, right? And I felt I had that faith that if I continue to do that over and over and over again, then the universe will reward me for that.
Yeah. And I love that. I really appreciate your articulation of your thoughts and emotions as you navigated this, because I think that's really something that we don't see. So often we can look at somebody and we can look at the factual external view of what happens in their journeys. Okay, well, first we went to school and then we did this job and then we did podcast and then we did this, but we don't get to see all of the internal things that transpire. And what makes the difference between the people who do the same external, I did the podcast and then I bought a house, and don't succeed? What is different about those versus the people who do? And one of the things you pointed out that I think is so true, that at least I've heard from many very successful people, is the optimism and the trust and the faith that things will work out and I will figure it out. And to your point, as you talked about, you then tell the universe, I'm ready for things to work out, right?
Absolutely. And even when you were talking about it was this idea of your thoughts create your reality, right? And so
yes,
what you can see all around you is like other people's thoughts then expressing themselves into reality, right? And so people who might have just like negative thoughts consuming them, I think, they'll start to pay attention to perhaps quote unquote negative things in their worlds, but everybody's living in the same world, right? And so it really is, what are you paying attention to? Yeah. What are you thinking about? And if you can hold that image of what you want, like consistently in your mind will figure out a way to get that and actually produce that into your reality. But that's honestly, it takes a lot of like willpower and discipline too, but it's not willpower of like forcing yourself to do something. It's rather like the willpower to hold an image of what you want for more of your day, right? And starting to step into that person that achieves that goal with ease, like completely naturally too. And so that is where it's a little bit different from how I think most people view the word discipline or view the term discipline and willpower. I think it's better used for your mind and being able to create a clear picture of exactly what you want and holding that in your mind for longer each and every day.
Yeah, that really makes sense and has rung so true for my life. It has, for anyone listening, like, if you don't believe it and you don't currently practice it, I so encourage you to give it a try, because you have nothing to lose and everything to gain by doing it. And it's, yeah, you just should be doing it. One of the things that popped into my mind as you were describing that is we hold the image in mind. And often, at least for me, this is something I've got caught up on a lot and I think has tripped me up, similar to like the purple feather example. Especially if we are hardworking, ambitious, intelligent people, I find that there's a tendency to try to force toward those things, which is like using our own maybe individual power is not quite the right word. I mean like my physical power, like I'm going to go force this, when it seems to me that it is the holding it in mind and allowing it to flow is like the really, really important shift that happens. And I'd just love to hear, what do you think about that? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I
completely agree. And because I was the same way, I was like, as an engineer, I'm like, I need this plan, right? Of like, this is my goal. This is exactly what it takes to get there. And that plan is helpful, but you can't stay rigid to that because you are currently operating at a certain level of awareness, right? Based on previous experiences and essentially what you know, which is like a very small amount of like all of the knowledge and like available and all of the insights, even intuitions available in the universe, right? And so it is almost, and I know this is a strong word, like ignorance to assume that that is the only way and that you have to stay rigid to that to hit your goals, right? Because the journey should be fluid, right? And so you can relax into that. And so the way it works is like your mind is kind of like a heat-seeking missile. And so it needs a target in mind, right? And so the easiest way to like create a target in this day and age is income, right? And so if I have a goal income wise, let's say 100K per month, then I don't really care how I get there as long as I do it in a moral way. And as long as I love the process and love the impact that I'm making, right? And so with that, I could initially say, okay, if I want to hit 100K per month, it's X amount of properties making X amount of like dollars per month, right? Like let's say 50 properties making $2,000 per month, then that's 100K per month, right? But that is one path out of an infinite number of paths. And there is what I like to call like the infinite intelligence. Other people call it, the universe, God, higher power, etc. Like all of this is the same thing, but there really is like an infinite intelligence that you can tap into. And if you've ever gotten an intuition, right, where like that seemingly came out of nowhere, like that to me is an example or an element of like the like tapping into the infinite intelligence. And sometimes those come out of nowhere. You don't have to do anything, but you tend to be in a relaxed state when you get those intuitions, and they kind of come out of nowhere. And then you just have to have the courage to take action, right? And let those ideas express themselves through you. And so with that, that was part of my journey. And I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit here, but while I was still growing my co-hosting business and that saw incredible growth, I just felt this calling of like, I want to help people, especially business owners and entrepreneurs, completely transform their mindset so they naturally become that person hits their goals with ease, where that's just the standard. Like that is these types of conversations, Jordan, I absolutely love them. And I love talking about this. And I just wanted to have more of those conversations and be able to help people, And so when I felt that calling, right, that to me was also just like an intuition or a calling from God of like, this is at this point in time, something you are meant to do. Will you say yes, or will you push that off for a later time? And I honestly felt some limiting beliefs around that at first of like, I do think I want to do that, but maybe a little bit later after I hit certain milestones and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
But eventually, I just started to receive more intuitions, more thoughts, and I faced those limiting beliefs around what I'm capable of, the impact I'm capable of making, and I started to say yes to it as well, right? I said yes to that opportunity I just said yes, like, yes, I am a mindset coach. I took on that identity. I shifted my identity towards that, and multiple business opportunities came to me, right? Like I literally attracted them, and to where basically it was helping scale and becoming a mindset coach and helping scale coaching programs too. And so by saying yes to that, then that is when, my income even started to rise even more, right? And like, it just really felt like I was called for that. And by saying yes, then the universe started to reward that in terms of giving me more of what I want, right? And so I just wanted to share that story because I do feel like, I know I was going on a tangent there, but if you create a rigid pathway and you feel like that is the only way, then you're actually like restraining other pathways from showing up. That might be even easier and more efficient to hit your goals. And so that is where there is an infinite intelligence. There's more options, and that's why you can't stay rigid. You have to kind of relax and start allowing more ideas to come in as well. And really trust your intuition too, of figuring out what is worth saying yes to versus what is just noise, right? And that's a whole different skill to develop too.
Oh, I love that. Man, I'm loving this conversation.
Me too.
Okay. So you mentioned the 100K a month. I'm curious, was that a goal for you at some point?
Yes.
Yeah. And we can fall into this rigid plan. Okay, so I want to make 100K a month. That means I need 50 properties, $2,000 a month, makes 100K. And here's exactly how I'm going to get it. I'm going to do this one for this many months, and then I'm going to have enough to buy the second house and etc. And then we almost like put on tunnel vision and we're just like, nope, nothing else. I'm refusing to look. And so much of that comes to that identity piece that you mentioned, right? Because the limiting beliefs, well, I believe that this is the only way that I can do it. When we realize that we are very ignorant, I think it's the right word, that there is more to this universe. There is infinite intelligence. We'll use that term, that can see possibilities that we can't even imagine. And when we let go of the need for things to go the way that we think they should go, I'm doing air quotes for anybody listening. When we let go of the way we think things should go, all of a sudden these doors start to open that we didn't even know were there, right? Often they come as a way of like an intuition or this serendipitous meetings, somebody just reaches out to you at just the right time with just the right opportunity. And I want to dive into intuition and calling a little bit because I think it's a critical piece of everything that you're talking about. And it's often people really struggle to identify, what is my intuition? How do I not just get lost in overthinking about it? How do I know what my calling is? Those are very hard things to articulate, but I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how somebody might identify if their intuition is calling to them or if they're experiencing a calling for something.
That's a good question. Still something that I'm gaining further and further understanding of. So I'm happy to share what my thoughts are currently. To me, it feels like the intuition, sometimes it comes out of the blue, right? Like for me, it's when I'm in my most relaxed state. So usually in the morning, like literally as I'm waking up, I feel this intuition. Just recently, I was like, I had an intuition of, I want to hire an executive assistant, right? And that just came to me literally as I was waking up. And it honestly, like it was like in a sea of thoughts, that one was like lighting up the brightest, right? Of like, to the point where when I woke up, I was like, I need to write this down and I need to execute on it because like that, it just felt so foreign, honestly, right? Of like, that wasn't a normal thought that comes across every single day. So that was the form of an intuition where I felt like that came from a higher power and I just have to allow that to express itself through me and take action on that. But other times, right, sometimes we think about intuition when making a decision, right? When we're faced with multiple options, what is our gut telling us, right? And that is, in those instances, I honestly feel like you can develop your intuition too by just making more decisions and making decisions quicker, And then just being able to live with the results and learn from the results too. Right. Like at first I thought like, let me just like wait for that intuition for any decision. Right. But then when I was talking to some mentors, people who have seen incredible results in their business, they were saying that you actually can refine your intuition there by making more decisions and allowing your experiences to then develop that intuition for the future too. So I do think there's multiple components to it. Some are fed by the higher power, my God. But other times it is like, let me just make a decision based on what I feel is the right decision and then see what happens, right? And then that will start to train my intuition moving forward too.
Yeah. I love that. So many people struggle with making decisions. Indecisiveness, analysis paralysis. It's so common, right? Especially in a day and age where we're overwhelmed by anxiety so frequently. There was a book I was reading. I'm totally forgetting what book this comes from. Hopefully I'll remember, but they said, instead of worrying about making the right decision, make the decision and make the decision right. As in, follow whatever you think your best guess is at what your intuition is, and then whatever that path that leads, make that the right path for you. As in, like, lean into it rather than always second guessing, like, well, what about this other thing, right? And I think that just ties into what you were saying, like, make more decisions. You'll start to get that feeling for the intuition. It's an intuitive feeling, you just kind of have to feel it out.
Exactly.
Another thing you said there was being relaxed. It's in relaxed states that you start to notice it. It's so important. And this is like a theme throughout our chat, right? We have to be relaxed. We have to let it flow. I think it was Albert Einstein who would go for walks very regularly. Dan Coe talks about this as well. A number of other successful people that, like, when you go for a walk or you do like menial tasks, you're vacuuming or you're sweeping the floor or whatever, it's like that's when the insights, that's when those intuitive just knowings pop into the mind. I'm curious, first, has that been the case for you? And second, how do you promote that relaxed state so that you're open to the intuitions?
Good questions. I would definitely say yes. Like, that has been apparent for me. I mean, I told you right before we started recording, I just went on a walk here in Chicago too, and it was absolutely beautiful. And what it made me realize too, as you were talking, is the importance of also creating that space for silence too, right? And like allowing yourself to think. And those are when those ideas can really form in your mind too, whether they're organic or whether, you go into those walks or washing dishes or whatever with that intention of thinking through something too. And in this day and age, with social media, with audiobooks, podcasts, music, etc., like it can get very easy. And I sometimes, forget about this too. And I let this happen of always having something in your ear or always just like, always watching something, right? And not really giving yourself space to think, right? But that is like, I've heard a quote, thinking is the hardest thing in the world, right? And I feel like it's even more true today. And that's why it's so important to do it, right? Like I have this desire of being one of one, right? And really like achieving extraordinary results, right? So that's extraordinary. So I can't do things that are ordinary. I have to do things differently. And so for me, then if thinking is the hardest thing in the world, I need to create more space and time to think. So there's that element of it where I completely agree. And then in terms of, what was the second part of your question? I feel like it was,
how do you promote the relaxation?
Yes. For me, one is meditation, right? And so creating space for meditation, even for visualizations as well. This is something that I'm actively working on in terms of visualization is part of my daily habits. Meditation is something I am incorporating into that daily routine. But I think that is a great way to promote that relaxation because you have to calm your mind, right? And that is ultimate. Like when we talk about getting into the relaxed state, there's sometimes like flurries of thoughts in your mind. And some, like what I love to do is get out of my environment that is perhaps like facilitating like feelings of overwhelmed and go to a peaceful environment. For me, it's the river, right? If I can stare at the river and just like be alone with my thoughts and start journaling too. Like for me, journaling, getting out those thoughts and then starting to write out what I'm grateful for. Like these are all feelings that I really love and they feel connected to me too. So like relaxed feels connected to peace, calm, and gratitude, right? Like all of those, they start to happen at once. And so if I can start to journal and get into that environment, then that is how I promote that relaxation. That's at least what works for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to dive a little bit into gratitude, and then maybe we can come back to the shift from real estate to mindset coaching, because that's obviously a huge piece of the journey. Gratitude was something that I didn't understand for a long time. And I had to go, I spent years kind of practicing it. You know, people say, write a gratitude list. You write down, okay, I'm grateful for my house and my car and my dog and whatever.
Yes,
but it felt very superficial and I was never able to stick to it. Gratitude now has become one of the most profoundly positive and impactful things in my life. And I hear in your story, like you've mentioned it a number of times, it is maybe even foundational to everything that you do and that you create, but it's not just superficial gratitude, right? As in, I get the sense, and yeah, I'm kind of exploring, and I'd love if you correct me if I ever misstep, but I get the sense that there's like a deeper, continuous, profound, all-encompassing gratitude that you experience. And I would just love to hear about that. Like, is that true? Is that not true? What do you think? What role does it play? Yeah.
No,
gratitude.
I love it. You hit the nail on the head as you've continued to do throughout this podcast. And you have just that deep understanding and empathy too that I really appreciate. So
thank you.
With that, I'd like to say so. I'd like to say yes. And how I wanted to start too is that in a similar fashion to you, it didn't start with having that holistic, deep sense of gratitude. Similar to you, like I felt that was kind of like a muscle to develop, right? Where for me, it's a non-negotiable every day to like how I start my day is writing out what I'm grateful for and really like making that a conscious effort to think about what I'm grateful for. Cause that's a great way to start the morning. And it, honestly, for me, still to this day, there are times where I'll wake up and having just like a lot of thoughts of like things I need to do today or like things that I'm not making a decision on that are creating anxiety. And when I start a day like that, then, there's two paths here, right? One is like, okay, I want to escape from it and like check my phone first thing in the morning. And I've just found whenever I choose that path, even though it's technically the easier path, right, to seek an escape, the rest of my day just feels more foggy, doesn't feel right? Versus days like today, where I elected to write what I'm grateful for anyways, right? And even when I had anxious thoughts in the morning too, I just elected to write down what I'm grateful for. And it just brought me a new perspective and a love of life too. Everything that comes with it. Even challenges, I love them because they're opportunities for growth. You said it, right? Like obstacles, right? Like that is how you grow, by overcoming those and facing them. So like, how do I change my perspective towards the things that are happening in my life too? And so that's why I found gratitude to be so powerful, is because gratitude is my choice, and it can be your choice as well, of your perspective towards anything that's happening in life, right? I really can go as basic and say I am super grateful, honestly, to be in this apartment, have a roof over my head,
right?
Have food in the fridge, right? And I can also get really detailed too about one of the things that is perhaps the most powerful for me is those memories that in real time, I just felt that deep sense of gratitude. Like it wasn't forced, it wasn't difficult, but it's so easy to go back to that and play that in my mind and feel that feeling of gratitude. That's what I would recommend to anyone listening to, for if gratitude is perhaps a unusual practice or something that you're not used to, think about those moments in the past that have brought you an immense sense of joy, right? Or where you just felt at peace and you just, or, truly grateful for that person in your life or that situation happening too. For me, like I mentioned, there was this moment of I bought 50-yard line tickets for my brother and I to the Steelers game. We're both huge Steelers fans, but we had never been to a Pittsburgh Steelers game in Pittsburgh. And there was 2 moments during that game. One was seeing his face because I had surprised him. He didn't know it was 50-yard line, like best seats in the stadium.
Right.
He thought we were like way up, in the nosebleeds. And when I saw his face, like see where we're sitting for the first time, man, I can like, that is so vivid in my mind of just like his shock and his happiness. Like it just gives me so much joy too. Right. And then there's another element of like when the Steelers scored a touchdown, right? And I was jumping up in Vinny's arms too. Just like there was so much joy there. Like those are moments where like I literally was in real time feeling that gratitude.
Yeah.
And so that is what I'd recommend people to stay in that feeling. And then if you have an image, right, of this goal that you want, that you're going after, create that mini movie, that image in your mind, but have that feeling of gratitude overlaid, right? Like start with that memory, hold that feeling, and then now move that feeling onto this new image, right? And then now you're all of a sudden connecting that goal that you had in mind. I call it a visualization of your goal achieved, and you connect it with that sense of gratitude as if you already have it. And the feeling is the most important. You mentioned that, right? Like the feeling is the most important thing. You can't just have that image and not have any emotions tied to it. So I think that was a long-winded way of telling you that, for me, it started a little bit more mechanically, and I had to develop that muscle and practice it. But now it is really like, it's just a part of me, right? Like it's how I view things, is being grateful for everything that comes my way.
Yeah, so good. Honestly, amazing. And what you said about cultivating gratitude by pulling on memories where the gratitude is very natural, and then residing in that, becoming comfortable with that feeling, familiar with that feeling, and then to overlay it on the image of what you wish to be having, as if you are grateful that it is already in your life. So it's not that I'm visualizing and thinking, oh, I hope that I get to have that one day. It's I'm grateful that I'm experiencing it right now. Right?
Absolutely. And that is how I also take into account that's what my morning routine entails too, right? So I write down gratitude at the top of my page.
Yeah.
And I write down like things that I'm grateful for that are in my life today. Like, right, the people in my life.
Sure.
The opportunities that come my way. I get really specific too with that, just having a bed to sleep on, right? The specific people in my life that I'm very, very grateful for, the things that I get to do today, like living this life. And so I really like rile up that emotion, right? I flare it up to really feel that gratitude. And then after that, I start writing down my goals as if I already have it, right? I am so happy and grateful that now that I'm making $100,000 every single month with ease, effortlessness, and consistency, right? And that I get to do what I love and have full control of my schedule every single day. I'm so grateful. I have complete time freedom and financial freedom too, right? And it's just so powerful too, right? When you tie that emotion of gratitude with that, like that's when your results really start to change very quickly. You start to attract what you desire very quickly. And it, like how I view it now, and I truly believe it, is like every time I'm writing into a magic journal where that journal, like anything that I write will come true, right? Yeah. It's actively like coming true, and I just have to write it down, and now I'm putting it out into the universe, and the universe has my back, right? Yeah. And so when you look at it like that, of like really anything that I want, like I can just write it down, then you start to feel that and you start to expect it, then that is when like it's really powerful, that exercise of journaling too.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I love getting into these conversations about these more esoteric parts of our reality that are invisible until you see them, and then you can't unsee them. And it's everywhere all of the time. And I, speaking for myself, wonder, how did I ever not see this?
Exactly.
I'm curious, your gratitude journaling, how long does that take you each morning? Like, let's say a listener decides, okay, I want to give this a try. How long should they expect that takes?
So I like to, in terms of what I do versus what I recommend for someone just starting, might be a little bit different. I love the Atomic Habits framework of starting small, make it a routine, and just expand, right? Like let it naturally happen. I take 30 minutes every day to journal. Part of that, there's a visualization element that comes with it, of just taking 5 minutes to visualize and create that picture in my mind. And then 25, 30 minutes of really writing down what I'm grateful for, writing down my goals as if they are already achieved, and feeling all of the feelings that come with that, getting really granular and in detail about that. And then also I have a self-love section too, right? And I write down everything that I love about myself, right? And that's my 30-minute routine. But what I would recommend for someone who's just starting out, and if 30 minutes feels like a lot, then no worries, right? Like do what's best for you. But I just love, if, you know, for people to write down even like 3 things that they're grateful for. And then with those 3 things right after that, write down their goal as if they already have it. That would literally take 5 minutes, right? But you just start that practice and let that expand naturally too.
Amazing. I'm feeling very inspired, and I have typically a meditation in the morning, a little bit of visualization. Very transparently, I've been slacking the last little bit, as I tend to go, you know, ebbs and flows of things. But I'm feeling very inspired to start doing this in my morning routine starting tomorrow. Yeah, I'm very excited to give that a try.
I love it. I also wanted to recommend too, real quick here. Like you said, there's ebbs and flows, right? And so that's normal for every single human being. And one of the cheat codes I have is, at first I felt like I had to do all of this myself. And then I learned, like, there's no bonus points if I do everything myself, right? And it honestly just slows down the process, because now, like, if I let myself down, fine, right? But if I start letting other people down, like, that's not something I like doing, right? So I took advantage of that, and I found an accountability partner, shout out Brendan. And what we do is we text each other our goals. So I literally, like, I take a picture on my phone and I text it to him every single day, along with some of my other mindset work, like, habits, right? For me, it's visualizations. It's also auto suggestions and studying. Again, this is just me, and I've over the past several months of stacked habits. I'm not recommending you do everything at once, but for me, that's what my habits are, fairly automatic, or like fairly daily at this point. But there are times where something gets in the way and I still want to get it done because I know how important it is. And in those instances, it's very, very, like, it's helpful to have an accountability partner who can, like, hold you accountable. So if you miss a day, for us, like, if I miss a day, I have to Venmo Brendan $20, and I don't want to Venmo him, right? And back and forth too. So we've been doing this for 7-8 months at this point. I think we've missed like a collective 7 days, like,
right.
But it would have been a lot more if we didn't have that, you know? And so that's just a way, like, find an accountability partner, find an accountability group, right? And that's what minimizes the drifting, because drifting is natural. But, like, where the greats, like, even the most successful people, the greatest entrepreneurs, athletes, etc., like, no one's perfect, right? But what they do differently is they're able to get back on track a lot quicker, right? They're resilient. They bounce back quickly. So just keep that in mind when, you know, you're thinking about your characteristics for success. It's not about being perfect, but how quickly can you get back on track, right? Every single time you drift.
Hell yeah. You're making my face muscles hurt from smiling so much at the things that you're saying.
I love it. Those are the best conversations.
Yeah. This is what good advice. Like, really, that's exceptional advice for me and for everybody listening. I'm curious, Punith, if we come back to your story, we got sidetracked into the nature of reality and such, but so you were doing the property business, and then you started mindset coaching, and you started to make this identity shift. I'm wondering if you can take me back to that part of the journey and kind of what happens from there.
Yeah, of course, because this was a huge inflection point in my life, and so I'd be happy to talk more about it. And so basically, this was honestly like 5-6 months ago at this point. It's fairly recent here, but so I'll backtrack just a little bit very briefly. But in May, June of last year was when I really started getting into the mindset work in terms of attending events with great mentors and great mindset coaches themselves, right? And really starting to learn from them and realizing this is exactly what I needed to unlock my growth, right? So that was the start of it. And I really kind of fell in love with, the books that we were studying. I fell in love with the material, right? The words, and really started to internalize it more and more. And it was just really cool to see, like, I implemented it as well. I didn't just listen and be like, cool, that's really cool, but I'm not going to do anything. I took action, and, our business grew from 2 properties, right? When I was saying I felt stuck, we were at 2 properties. We had just let go a number of them, and essentially we're starting fresh. And in the span of 5 months, we scaled to 12 properties in our portfolio, right? So 6x growth in the span of 5 months here. And it was all like a testament to my commitment to mindset, right? I started making decisions in alignment with my goal, achieve self, right? I started hiring out my bookkeeping instead of spending 8 hours doing it myself, which I hated, lowered my vibration. I hired it out. We delegated and we found a revenue manager to like really take our expertise to the next level and make sure that we have an expert, managing our pricing strategy for our properties, right? We found a virtual assistant. We were starting to really build out our team, which freed up my energy to do things that I really enjoyed, which is growing the business, being a leader. Like, that is what I love to do, is how do I put the right pieces in place? Like, that's just something that like was my highest and best use. You talked about it. Like, it's just something that comes a little bit more naturally, is like putting in the systems and the team to see us succeed, and then making sure that I develop as a leader so everyone on our team succeeds as well. And that really facilitated me being in a higher like vibration and energy. And honestly, like, clients started coming to us, right? Like we found, like, someone just found us on Google when that never happened before. Right. And they had like 5 properties in their portfolio. Right. And so boom, like all of a sudden I didn't really do anything to attract, other than like attracting that person into my life, and then having the confidence and the energy to, like, they chose us over 7 other management companies they were interviewing. Right. And so that version of Punith was different than, the 2022 or 2023 version of Punith, who probably wouldn't have been able to close that deal. Right. And so that is why the mindset work was so important to me. And naturally through that, I just fell in love with it so much. And I just found myself having conversations about it with so many people. And those people were like, honestly blown away by what I was sharing. And I felt that I was just reading 10x is easier than 2x. And it talks about kind of your unique value that you can bring to this world. And I honestly felt like this was it. It was this idea. I felt I had a certain level of empathy and understanding, as well as combining it with, my problem solving mindset that comes with my engineering background and this understanding of the mindset work. All of that was my unique value that people were honestly like benefiting greatly from the words and insights I was sharing. And so, but from there, I still felt like I needed to hit X milestone, right? For some reason, I felt I needed to hit like 25 properties in our portfolio, and I needed to like leave my job in order to be a mindset coach and have that credibility. Right. And so now I'll fast forward to that decision-making point. And at this point, right, I had just come out of another event with it was a high ticket mastermind retreat, right? And the biggest takeaway I had from that was your attitude, which is your vibration. Like, that is everything, and you can control your attitude towards everything. So I made a commitment to myself that I would double my enthusiasm with everything that I do, even work, right? Which at that point was like, I wasn't the biggest fan at that point. It was like not really as fulfilling as I'd like it to be. But I went into everything of like, how can I make the greatest impact and serve others? How can I continue to serve others and just be super enthusiastic with everything? Like, I started thanking my coworkers for like their amazing work, right? And I really just started to think differently and just really have a greater love for life too. That's when I was faced with like, a mirror was essentially held up to me of like a great friend of mine and now business partner, Joel. He held up that mirror and was just like, you're already a mindset coach. You just haven't said yes to it yet. And I think you have a limiting belief around it that you need to hit an arbitrary milestone in order to help others in an official professional capacity. Yeah. And so with that, I'm not taking credit for it, right? Like, but I attracted Joel into my life, and I'm very grateful for that every single day. But I was the one who still had to make that decision, and I acknowledged it. I sat on it for just a little bit, and then that same night, I made that commitment in my mind of like, I am a mindset coach, right? And I had a great support group, a great accountability group too, to reinforce that idea over the next couple of days too. But once I made that identity shift, like, it was just a decision in my mind of like, I am a mindset coach, and I'm destined to be the best mindset coach in the world, right? Like, it wasn't just a mediocre one. That's not going to serve people to the level I want to serve. Like, if I had this calling of becoming the best mindset coach in the world, which I've had visualizations around of like, my 36-year-old self has now told me like, you will be the best mindset coach in the world. Like, that really has resonated strongly with me. And so I made that decision, and that is, again, I didn't do anything. I didn't go out and seek new clients or anything like that. Opportunities then came to me, right? And that's the universe at play saying, cool, now that you made that decision, like, let's start giving you what you want, you know? And that's when I attracted those two business opportunities of really helping scale mindset coaching programs and be part of one myself too, and really just continue to master my craft as a mindset coach, learn from the best of the best too, and just continue to provide value to clients, to team members alike. And so that was just kind of the inflection point there of, you know, that mirror was literally held up, not literally, it was held up to me, and it was just the universe asking, are you ready for this, or are you going to continue to delay it?
Yeah. That resonates a lot for me. When I was doing other forms of coaching, so I was a kinesiologist, and then I was a health coach, and then I was a wellness coach, and then I was a mental wellness coach. And as you were talking about, some arbitrary goalpost milestone we have to hit before then we're credible enough. Yeah, that one really hit home for me, because I totally get that. And I found for me, once I became a psychotherapist, it was almost, yes, there was the external credibility, but there was also a shift inside for me where that title then it was like I gave myself permission to really step into it, and so much started to unfold. And I say that in validation of what you're suggesting, or what you were saying about, once we make that decision inside, the external world starts to reflect it as well. Yeah.
No, absolutely. You have to go first. And I continue to see that every single day of, I have to make that decision with faith, right?
Yeah.
I go first, and then the universe responds, but it's not the other way around.
Yes. I've had this mental imagery. I tend not to be a very visual person. So when I do have visuals, it really stands out to me. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I imagine I'm standing on this cliff face. It's about 100 feet up, straight vertical drop, ocean, crashing waves below, sharp rocks. You don't want to be there. The path forward almost feels like you have to take the step off of the cliff with the faith that you will be caught. And when you take that step with faith, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this like step appears for you.
I love that.
But if you go into it with fear and doubt and insecurity, you fall. And it's like, part of it is that we have to have faith. And the faith is, the way that ties in is where you say, you have to go first. You have to take the step, right? It's not just going to magically happen. Like, you have to be the one willing to do it. What do you think about that?
It's such a good visual. I love it a lot. And I wanted to add a tactical recommendation with that.
Yes.
Faith is like inherently, like, it can be difficult to develop, right?
Yeah.
Faith is the belief in something when there's the lack of evidence to support it, right?
Yeah.
And so with that, like, again, I grew up not having like the best relationship with God, honestly. I grew up in a very religious household, Hindu, and for me, it wasn't like it was a bad relationship. It was more agnostic, just because there was language barriers, honestly, like,
right.
And at the point where I was learning more about it, for whatever reason, you know, with the language of Sanskrit, which I didn't understand, it just felt more mechanical than spiritual. And so honestly, getting into this work has strengthened my relationship with God. And the reason why I talk about it too is, you know, that's another, you know, example of faith, right? And so, but how did I develop that? Honestly, for me, it was just through auto-suggestions. It was through enthusiastic auto-suggestions too, right? And so for me, I take 5 minutes And this is like, for me, the biggest driver of my rewiring of my mind and overcoming limiting beliefs and replacing those with beliefs that serve me. And so enthusiastic auto suggestions, I take 5 minutes 3 times a day, right? So 15 minutes in total, morning, afternoon, at night. And I put some like high vibration music on. It's called Pathos by Ludovico Eunadi, I think is how you pronounce his last name. But I put that in the background kind of in my headphones. And then I start like really auto suggesting. I get emotional, enthusiastic about it. And I say, I have unwavering faith that I'm supported in every phase of my growth. I have unwavering faith that as I take this leap, the universe will catch me, right? And so I've like unwavering faith in the infinite supply. I just keep repeating that to myself. And the reason why that works is because that is one of the ways that you can make in a mindset shift. You can shift your paradigm is you start to, it's called the repetition of thoughts. And then that's how you impress it into your subconscious mind. And then from your conscious mind to your subconscious mind, once it's there, then that is when your behavior will start to reflect. And then that, when you start doing, then your results will start to reflect as well. So that's like my very simple way of going about it. But that's why it works so well, is because that's what people talk about with the affirmations every day, right? Repeating that over and over and over to yourself, you really start to believe it. You consent to those ideas and it pushes those limiting beliefs out and it starts to accept more of the positive, constructive ideas instead. Mm-hmm. So that's what I use with faith, right? Is if that's not something that comes natural to you, which it doesn't come natural to a lot of people, right? It's still your responsibility to develop that. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very difficult to do things on your own. But why do things on your own when you have a higher power that is right there? You just have to tap into it and access it. And that comes with faith, and it has to be unwavering, right? Mm-hmm. And so that is what I auto suggest to myself consistently.
Yeah, I appreciate that as a tactical game plan addition to how do you actually go about doing this sort of thing. One of the things I want to add in addition or to the validity, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, people auto-suggest to themselves all day, every day, and they just don't realize it. And so you as the listener, if anyone's listening to this and you're like, this sounds silly and won't work, realize that that's an auto-suggestion that you just gave to yourself and how often that happens throughout our days. I have people come to me for therapy, and as I imagine you have people come to you for mindset coaching, and when we hear the way that they speak to themselves, it's like, well, how could you have had any other results than how you're feeling? You know, like think about what you tell yourself all day. I am ugly. Nobody likes me. I'm a piece of crap. I don't deserve anything good in my life. If you auto-suggest that all day, every day, you're going to be a damn expert at it, and your life's going to match that, right?
Exactly. Right. And so it's the same. I love the way you put that too, because it even shows up in like when we talk about creating those pictures. Some people say like, oh, I have a bad imagination, right? But then they're the ones who are worrying all the time and creating these like mental scenarios of like what could go wrong. Just imagine if you took that same power, like you have a very powerful imagination, and you just use it in a positive light instead. Mm-hmm. It's the same way with the auto suggestions. You can have negative ones or you can have positive ones. So, but it's your choice which one that you want to like continue to feed into your mind.
Yeah. Yes. I'm very enthusiastic about that. Yes.
I love it, Jordan.
So coming back to your journey here, so we went from college to engineer to podcast to housing to rentals and Airbnbs to mindset coaching. And we're in now the present time with the mindset coaching. And I'm curious if you can tell me more about what is it that you're doing, as in who are you helping and what results are you helping them achieve with the mindset coaching? That way, if anybody is listening and they're like, I want to work with Punith, they know if they're the right person for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I help entrepreneurs, like business owners primarily, transform their self-image, expand their self-image, and really overcome limiting beliefs. I help entrepreneurs who feel stuck or feel like they're spinning their wheels, really expand their self-image so that they can start to produce the results and hit their goals with ease, right? Without feeling like they have to work harder, work more hours, but rather I help them multiply their income while saving them time too, and giving them more peace of mind while they do it, right? And so that has been one of the underrated benefits of being in this work is, like I told you, Jordan, like I had my engineering job and I was running 3 different businesses.
Yeah.
Most people would be like, how in the world are you doing all of that, right? And I honestly, truly feel like it's with ease, like with peace of mind, more peace of mind, even with bigger challenges that most people would like be paralyzed by with that type of decision to make. I feel like I love every single moment of it. I honestly feel less overwhelmed, less stressed doing it than I did when I was just doing one thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's really a testament to this mindset work and my calmness, my positivity, the peace of mind that has come with it. And so that is what I help entrepreneurs with, is transforming themselves and really becoming that person where they just start making those decisions and they have those thoughts, right, that align with their goal achieved self, right? And just giving them clarity on that. So I help them reverse engineer that self-image and auto-suggest that to themselves over and over so that that becomes just one with who they are right now, right? And there's more to that with a personalized mindset plan, personalized routine that I help with, but that is ultimately who I serve and why I feel it's so beneficial.
Yeah. And as somebody who's been an entrepreneur for the last 7 years at this point, and I have had a lot of spinning my wheels and banging my head against the wall and just feeling like I'm getting nowhere. And what I found, because I also had to do a lot of mindset work and hired mindset coaches to help me, which was when breakthroughs started to happen. It was really when I started to break those limiting beliefs with the help of somebody else like yourself that things really started to shift for me. It was when I started to do the visualizations and the gratitude that you mentioned that I met my wife, that I started to get the jobs that I wanted. Hell, even like my psychotherapist supervisor, I got this ridiculous situation that I never could, like people would be like, how did you get that? Like I got 2 supervisors, an entrepreneur who just like opened all of the books and is like, this is exactly how you start and run a private practice. And like, here's how you do it. And just like setting me up for success. And anyways, all of these amazing things as a result of doing exactly what you have said. And I say that again to support that this is such valuable work and it really makes the difference when we open ourselves up to it. And especially for entrepreneurs. So yeah, that's amazing.
Thank you.
Now we're going to put, coming back to this for just a second, you have achieved quite a lot. So I want to, as a wrap up to our story here, so you have gone through all of this. Now at this point you have, like we mentioned in the intro, you have quintupled your income. You have freedom and fulfillment and purpose in life. I'm wondering, are there any other achievements or transformation pieces that you want to say as like, this is what has happened as a result of your journey?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, obviously the first things that come to mind is what I had been seeking was that freedom, right? That time freedom, that financial freedom, and to, you know, be able to have put in my 2 weeks notice and quit my job,
Let's
right?
Go.
Is a huge step towards that, right? Of living my perfect week every week and having the financial freedom that comes with it too, to be able to travel more and be able to take care of my loved ones. Like all of that is rapidly coming, but also like actively doing that too, right? Being able to take my brother to that Steelers game is like, that was honestly me going first and then letting the income come from there, right? Like from making that decision, but it's what I want to continue to do. I think the underrated part of all of that is just doing it with a new sense of like love and appreciation and peace of mind too, where I didn't feel like I worked harder for it. I honestly felt like I worked less for it, you know, than ever before. And so that was very eye-opening for me of, you know, I had this belief that I needed to work harder, I needed to work more, and that it would take a long time to make a lot of money, right? And all of those, I just end up auto-suggesting the opposite, right? And just seeing that start to come into my life very quickly, right? Seeing my income start to rise rapidly. And I honestly started bringing in my goals quicker, because I was like, why am I waiting a year to do this when I could do it in 3 months?
Yeah.
You know, like that's the sort of faith that came with it too. And so honestly, it was just like the biggest thing that came with all of this is it felt like a weight off my chest, honestly, right? Of like feeling like I had to do all of this on my own. One, I didn't, right? I have a support system. I have a universe that is backing me and supporting with that. And two, like that I needed to be hard on myself. Like that idea, right? We've talked about that, being able to set that aside and replace it with love and grace was monumental for me in terms of just letting go of that weight off my chest and just, you know, being who I am and being my authentic self too.
That's amazing. Amazing, Punith. Where can people reach out to you? What's the best way for them to contact you, to follow you? Where can people reach out?
Yeah, my LinkedIn is probably the best, Punith Upadhya. I create content centered around mindset and just more about who I am too. And so I post that on LinkedIn, both videos and, you know, written posts. So people can connect with me there and can also set up a call with me too. My you know, Calendly link is right there within my profile too.
Amazing. Everybody listening, Punith's LinkedIn will be in the show description below this. Make sure you reach out to him there, follow him, go check out some of that amazing content.
Thank you.
Punith, thank you so much for being here today. This was an exceptional conversation. To everyone listening, thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us your time, and looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Thank you.